There you are.
Hey,
I'm being recorded, it says.
yep, it's recording. Yep.
Yeah, it's been a long time. You look good. I see you on Facebook all the time, so it's kind of fun. I like your whimsical creativity. That's good. That's good. So yeah, it's been a while, I think.
Yeah. Good to chat with you, man. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, well, whenever we got together, whenever I saw you, we always got into good conversation. So you're a good conversation partner. So I look forward to it, especially for some reason lately. I've been having encounters with people that are coming from right wing point of view, like my wife's one of her favorite cousin is a staunch Republican and always would you know provoke us into doing so. And he's sending me some stuff, and then I have a cousin. So it's like it's time, and I think that's like you mentioned before. It's like there's got to be conversation about this, and I think when we get to the real stuff, most people aren't as dogmatic as we might think. I mean, I'm not as I've been pretty radical all my life and a leftist without a doubt, but um, it's just not that simple. So, once you just go ahead and, we've touched on some really interesting points and issues. So, whatever you want to do, I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess first, let me just say that I really feel you on that. It's like I grew up in Portland. My parents are both Democrats. I'm
Yeah,
super liberal. I'm not liberal. Just in the last couple years, I've just stretched to
yeah,
think about some different stuff.
yeah. That's good.
And just seeing everybody, like you said, the dogma. Seeing everybody be like so finger wagging. I'm just like,
I know.
hold on. We got we got to tease this apart.
Yes, yes. And and most of the conversations I have, most of the objections I have for either side is this dogmatic thing and kind of an angry kind
Yeah,
of kind of thing. And I'm a lot of people on the right are characterize people on the left in a certain way, and I don't identify with a lot of that. And I've been, when I was in junior high school, we used to get together, a bunch of us get together and have arguments and debates about conservative versus liberal. We had Barry Goldwater in Arizona, and that was a big deal. And I went to a speech about Barry Goldwater, and everybody stood up for him, and I refused to stand up. I was, but anyway, so and I think the economy is an important part of it. In terms
yeah.
of how and government, and also this whole idea. I think it's important the whole idea of what used to be called and maybe still is political correctness, and censoring people and saying you can't say certain things, and uh, it's gotten crazy. And I
And so
think that
yeah, and so it's all this balance on, we want to fix some things without destroying other things,
yeah.
and there's a lot of unintended consequences too. So I think,
Yeah, and I was thinking about this. I was getting ready this morning, and if you don't mind, I have a personal example of my ambiguity about this whole thing. So, so I'm 73 years old, and I'm lucky enough to be able to retire. I don't have a whole lot of money, but and I couldn't do it without Social Security. So if I didn't have Social Security, I'd be working till I die, and and I wouldn't have the free time I have. I'm helping to raise my grandchildren here in San Francisco. I wouldn't have that opportunity. But at the same time, when I was my wife and I were trying to get a business going in counseling, and the tax level was, I mean, we not only, we sometimes we'd make $100,000 in a year. This was like in the 90s, and we couldn't make ends meet because we had in private, you have a business of your own, you don't have a steady paycheck. And so, you know, if we and if maybe you know this already, there's an estimated tax that you have to pay. So it's from what you made last year at that same time, you have to pay that. And if you don't pay it, then you pay a penalty. So what happened to us over time was at the end of the year, we were always not only had to pay the penalty, but we had to pay back income tax, and we just dug a hole where we had to give it up. And so, and as I looked at it, our total, our total income tax was like 43%. And we
Yeah.
were just starting out as a small business. And I knew people who, who made 3 times as much as me, and their rate was 25%. And I thought, that's just not fair.
Well, sure.
You
Yeah.
know, so
That would not be fair.
yeah. So, but at the same time, so the government does that. At the same time, the government, Social Security makes it possible for me to retire at all. But if I would have had the opportunity, if I wouldn't have had to pay so much money in taxes when I was actually making money, maybe I could have invested it and had more money. So it's like,
yeah,
it's kind of like you're caught. I mean, if and I'm actually fortunate. So I'm pretty well educated, and I could do things that made a fair amount of money. I could teach at the university. I had a pension at the university, which was okay. But my wife, who passed away, about 6 months ago, she was on Social Security, and she was making like $12,000 a year. So if she did, if she wasn't, and she, worked as a professional her whole life, but she didn't have the money to invest in some kind of. So, I think from a personal experience, I had mixed feelings about it. I love the fact that, when Social Security was implemented, it was called socialist and communist, and it wasn't, and they it wasn't as extreme as FDR wanted it to be, but it still was something that was fought against. And there are still people who say, that it should be eliminated. But
well, so what would you say if I guess I'm thinking like, what's the difference between Social Security? Because that's your money, you're paying into it
well,
through your life. So
yeah, not. I mean,
bank account and
yeah, I mean, literally, I'm paying was gone already. I was paying whatever was put into Social
Can you
Security
say
for
that
my.
again? It glitched out.
Okay, so I mean, it's technically, it's literally not my money. It's your money that's paying me. So and mine too. But I mean, if you're paying Social Security tax, that money goes to me.
I hear
And
I
then
hear
when I was paying Social Security tax, that money goes to the people who were on Social Security then.
Okay.
So it's not, so the argument on, on a lot of conservatives or libertarians say, if I took the money that, it was a significant amount out of my paycheck. If I took that money and invested it for myself,
Yeah.
then I would have more money than I get now. So, it's complicated, obviously, but so it's not, it's a system that, has to be fed by current people who are working.
Well, so what about I remember my 8th grade social studies teacher. He was an awesome guy. He was the first person to talk to me about the stock market and investment kind of stuff like that. And
Yeah.
he had mentioned, and I didn't quite understand it then. He had mentioned that Social Security was going to run out by the time I was retired.
That's the projection, right?
So
And
what do you know about
so
that?
well, the thing is, my generation gets trashed from both sides. The younger generation and the older generation always say that baby boomers are the problem, and basically what's happening is that, if you probably know this, baby boomers are people who were born after World War II, and it was a huge increase in births, and I was a part of that toward the beginning. So when we all retire, and there aren't that many people, not nearly as many people as there were when we were working,
Okay.
paying into it, there's not enough money to pay us all because we're all just greedy bastards. And but that's the simple answer. I mean, I'm not really an economist, or but I know that that's part of what's going on.
Yeah, just by population.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the whole and the whole thing about healthcare too is there's a lot of issues that are being pressed now because our generation is like starting to deteriorate, and we need Medicare, and we need medicine, and a lot of people don't have good insurance, and So that creates, creates a crisis in itself. So if that does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's lots of changes. I mean, I grew up in the '60s, and this is at least as crazy as then right now, for different reasons, but similar kinds of things that polarized people. People were polarized then in a big way, in terms of, people who objected to the Vietnam War, people who were against civil rights. I mean, when I know when Martin Luther King was killed, was assassinated, and I was in college my freshman year, and I found out about it because people were cheering about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not anyway. So, so yeah, we can talk about that. We can talk about the Jordan Peterson's interviews brought up some interesting points that we could talk about. So whatever is on your mind, and I have some thoughts too. But
yeah, fire. Just go ahead and shoot.
Let's see. I think again, let me see. I had some notes here. Let's see. Get it. So one of the things that and this is a question that I don't have an answer for, but it's like that video that Peterson did, said how money works, and he says, no matter what you do, it's a natural law that everything goes automatically to the top 1% at every level. It's a natural kind of thing, and I wouldn't necessarily argue with that point. But one question I have was like, well, part of being human is taking what's natural and doing something different with it. So we have that ability to do that. Yeah. But he says we don't know how to do that, but we do.
Okay.
We do know how to do it. And it's, and that's what happened. So that in the World War II, one of the things that motivates countries to spend a lot of money is war. And so we got into World War II, and everybody supported World War II at the time, and most everybody. And so there was this huge tax that was levied against the rich. And we're talking about 90%, something like that, 94%, and that's not on all their income. It's like usually when there's this kind of this ridiculous tax rates. It's not on it's like you can make $2 million, and then after that we'll take 90% of it, which sounds outrageous. But what it did was, it created jobs, building munitions and stuff, and the whole war effort, and the money went to a lot of different people. And so after World War II, there was a redistribution of wealth, so that people who were in the middle class got a lot of money. There was a GI Bill. A lot of people came out of there. They were from poor backgrounds. They could go to college. It was free, and so it lifted the whole and it was like it was an incredible transformation of the middle class. And so my grandfather, and this is kind of mixed. So all my grandparents came from Italy, and so they came over to the beginning of the century. And one of my grandfathers, he got a job scraping paint off of old Pullman cars. You know what a Pullman car is? Yeah, Pullman car is invented by this guy named Pullman, and he said, "Wouldn't it be cool when people take long trips in trains that there's a whole car full of beds, and you just have a bed and you go to sleep?" And he made a ridiculous amount of money. And there's a part of Chicago called the Pullman District, and Pullman, and this is a good example of, like you were saying, how private enterprise. I don't know how much he probably got some government support, but he basically built a housing development. And my grandfather had this funky job, and he worked And my grandmother never worked. They had their own house. They owned their own house. They had lots to eat. I mean, a good amount. They didn't have a lot of money, but they raised 3 kids on one salary. And the guy was scraping paint off of. Could you do that today?
No way.
No way. And
Yeah.
so what happened was, so that, my father too, he grew up during the Depression. His father made a lot of money, and he was able to do that. And this, they did that. So the alternative for immigrants who were, Italians were prejudiced against. It wasn't. I mean, Italians weren't considered white. They were considered inferior, along like other people, a lot of other people. And yeah, right. And we got assimilated.
People think Jewish people are white.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. And and they are they. I mean, race is a ridiculous idea anyway. I mean, I have, 2 of my grandchildren are part black, and my new granddaughter's half Mexican, and what does that mean? I don't know. But anyway, so the 2 alternatives were, my grandfather got this funky job, never learned to speak English. He lived in a neighborhood where they spoke Italian, and the only person on this work gang that he worked on spoke English. He spoke English, and the rest of them couldn't speak English. So he can get that job. My other grandfather came to this country with his brothers. They started a little bitty grocery stand, and they made a shitload of money, and they all opened liquor stores. And my grandfather ended up his life. He was worth over $1 million.
Nice.
And they did it that way, because he was a hard-headed businessman. They didn't get subsidies, and that's what all his brothers. They were all rich. They all had a lot of money. And my father grew up during the Depression. He never had to worry about food and stuff like that, in spite of what. Anyway, so there was that kind of thing where there was more what they call shared prosperity. This was up a situation where money, extra, is it difficult to live on $2 million? I don't know, I mean, so, and also this idea, I mean, socialism, if you one of the main war cries of communism, if you remember this, if you know this, was like, workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. And so this, Marx was writing during the Industrial Revolution in England, where children 8 years old were working 7 days a week in unhealthy situations. And so, they said, if we unite, we can go on strike. And people said, you're a communist. Labor unions were considered pro-communist kinds of things. I mean, and people, I knew people who my people a long time ago, older men that were involved in that, and they were considered communist sympathizers. They were anti-American, but and you had this question earlier. It's like, without labor unions, people would still be working ungodly hours. There'd be no weekends, there'd be no holidays, there'd be no benefits. All the stuff
that also choose not to work for those companies,
but no companies had that, right? I mean,
but then workers get together and like make your own thing,
Well, the workers get together and say, look, and this is the principle. You are rich, but I'm doing this work here, and you couldn't be rich without me working.
But you also wouldn't have a job without that person. That's
right. It's mutual. But what happened without government intervention, without the unions and without government regulations, people would, once you have the money and you have the power, you say, I'll just hire somebody else.
Yeah.
And I'll, and you don't like me paying $1 an hour? I can find some, because things were difficult at that point. And so, you're lucky you got a job.
Yeah.
Immigrant.
Yeah.
And so, the Pullman company, Pullman was smart, because he said, okay, I'm going to treat you right, and you work your ass off, but at least you'll have, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But, without, I don't know the history of that, whether Pullman was coerced or whether he had some kind of motivation to do that. Regardless, I think if you you can't, and you mentioned this before. I don't think, I think history has shown that people aren't necessarily motivated to do the right thing when they have a lot of power. Power,
Yeah,
it's like it
absolutely.
distorts your reality in some sense. And that's just, when you start rationalizing, well, I did this all by myself. Well, you didn't do it all by yourself, you know.
Even just being born in this country,
Right.
do it all by yourself.
Right. I mean, which that's, I mean, and you've mentioned community, and I think that's community and family is really the foundation of a healthy society, and it has to be extended. It's like, what do we do about homeless people? I mean, it's an epidemic.
Yeah.
I mean, they finally decided, and I don't know the details of the funding, but about a mile from here, I could see it from my house. They're building this enormous affordable housing apartment building,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I mean, rents here, you get a studio that's, 500 square feet, costs you $2,000, $2,200 to live in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm lucky, my family, I mean, I don't have the money to live in San Francisco. So my daughter, it's a long story, but my daughter was able to buy this house in San Francisco because her husband's uncle bought it in the 80s for like $40,000 or something like that. And they made it possible for them to buy it. And so I am taking money I have together, we're renovating it, and we're building me an apartment in the backyard. So,
Oh, yeah.
so I think, and I agree with you definitely about the fact that, solutions need to be local, but governments has a role. And the question is what government, and I think you made the statements like, we want to make sure that the power we give to government isn't something that's going to interfere with us. That it, like with me, when we were trying to make it in our business, and we were just like, we're being buried in taxes,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, and those taxes didn't go toward my payment. The Social Security, guaranteed me the place, but most of those taxes went to, I don't know where they went. Anyway,
Well,
so
my whole thing on that is I need some receipts. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
I'm like, roads and schools is one thing, but like, where's all that money going? Like,
well, there's the defense,
for sure.
and there's
And I would happily pay for that kind of stuff.
yeah, well, and I, but there's waste and all of that stuff. I have one of my
Absolutely.
nephews works for Lockheed Martin. He's an electrical engineer that is responsible for the I forget what it is, F-50 something. Anyway, this fighter plane that costs like a couple billion to build each one, and it's so specialized that they never use it, but they still build it. And so it's not, well, they don't necessarily build it. So my nephew basically, he served in Iraq for a while, and so he spends like a week a month on doing reserve. He's in the Navy Reserve, and so he goes there and he has drinks with his buddies, and then they hang out and talk about eventually what they would do if we were attacked, or I don't know what they do, but he gets a salary. He gets a salary to, a significant salary to be the engineer on this plane that we don't even use. And and that kind of warfare is really is on its way out. I mean, this gets to, I mean, all these issues intertwine. It's like, are we getting better? Are we improving as a species? And one of those, I forget what the guy's name, but he's, in a lot of ways we're, there's vast improvement. And the United States is a constant improvement. I mean, I think I mentioned this kind of struck me when I watched this Ken Burns documentary on Benjamin Franklin. I'd like to mention that. Have you seen it?
No.
It's worth checking out. One of the things that really interested me was that, I mean, first of all these guys who were doing this, who had these ideas, were brilliant. but they also believed that, that the British in particular were superior to everybody else. And, Benjamin Franklin said, and John Adams were going, yeah, we don't want these Mediterranean guys getting in a position where they're, and certainly blacks, they'll never make it. We'll have to, I don't know what's going to happen with them, but we don't want them in this thing. And so, and the British, so this whole question, and I'm jumping around, and interrupt me if you want to ask me questions, but because once I get started, I'm and so, they basically started off by saying, this is, we have these ideals, and well, the British created, they came up with these creative ideas that are just changed the world, and we're still trying to live up to them, and they didn't live up to them. And that's the thing about being human, is like, you have, to the degree that you come up with something brilliant, oftentimes you're going to come up with something evil or something awful. And you see this in celebrities, but you see it in countries. And so the British, this is one of the things points I wanted to make, where one of the people that Jordan Peterson was talking to said, why are the European countries so advanced and others, a lot of countries haven't really gotten their shit together? And he said, well, they have these brilliant ideas, they have these Enlightenment ideas and, freedom, open societies. But, and he gave the example of the Netherlands, I think it was. And he said, oh yeah, they invited all kinds of people, and Jews could come and be a part of it. And, they had radical ideas. They invited them in, and that's what did it. Because in order to create a Europe that was strong, each, and that's how they did it, by having great ideas.
But sorry, you glitched out again. Just repeat that last
okay,
part.
where did
you said in order to keep Europe strong?
Right. So he said he's trying to give an example of why European countries have become so much more effective than countries around the world. And he said that's because countries like the Netherlands had an open society. They invited people in, and anyone could participate, and they came up with great ideas. And so that's how they became strong. But if you look at, and this is something that the right doesn't like to talk about a lot. The reason that Europe became strong is because they all became colonizers. I mean, they all went all over the world and said, how can we take over, how can we get the natural resources, the gold, the oil, the spices from these other countries? And they brought it back, and they subjugated these people. And their reasoning was, we're bringing Christianity to these people. They ought to be thankful. And we're bringing civilization to them. But at the same time, that's how they became rich. And it's within the rich country that they created that ideas started to be. It's kind of like, Renaissance Italy was the same story.
Yeah.
The De Medicis were crazy, violent, but they were rich. And so they gave money to, Michelangelo and all these people. And so, it was intense what happened in Italy. And so my point is that, what creates strength and openness and progressive society is often the subjugation of other people.
But doesn't like every society ever has done that?
Yeah, right. That's right. I mean, where did the Europeans get their black slaves? From other black groups who conquered. That was what they did, was they would conquer the next tribe, and they would take the slaves, and then they would sell them.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't hear any talk about Africans doing that to themselves.
Yeah.
Which to me, is the problem is that different sides don't want to admit that they were they were shitty.
But that's why I think this is a hoax, is because I'm like, there's some important pieces of the information that they're just leaving out
Yeah.
to fire up this base or this base.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, wait, that key piece of information breaks the whole thing down. So we should,
They ignore that. And and whether they do it, I don't think they necessarily do it on purpose. But, so if you look at the reality is white supremacy and racism fueled civilization. I mean,
but
how can you deny it?
Fighting for their group.
Yeah.
Like the Native Americans were all warring with each other.
Right. Yeah, but nobody, Native Americans didn't conquer the world.
That's right.
The sun never set on the British Empire.
Yeah.
They owned stuff all over the world. They were fucking amazing. How did they do that? I don't know. This little bitty island.
Yeah.
And, because they didn't produce a lot of stuff themselves because they were so small.
Yeah.
Japan was the same way. It's a little bitty island. How did they become so powerful? Because out of necessity, they go, man, we don't have anything. The British would go to Scotland and Ireland where the farms were better, and they take over them. What they did to the Scots and the Irish is criminal.
Yeah.
About the potato famine, what happened during the potato famine?
Yeah. My mom's Irish, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. The Irish weren't considered white either. So, yeah, but the British were at the top of this hierarchy. Anything less than that, everything else was inferior. And my wife's family comes out of that, and farmers, and they had, my father-in-law, I think, married this woman who was Greek at one point, and people just shit, and he just divorced her immediately and married a nice, English farm girl. But then my wife married, her first husband was black. And that was like, people just shit.
Well, that's my parents too. My dad's Puerto Rican, my mom's Irish.
Yeah.
And my mom's side of the family, they're from Arkansas, actually. My dad is from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure he was a real racist, And when they first got together, there's a lot to that. But when they first got together, he wasn't really happy. But the story goes that when I was born, that all that melted away for him,
That's the answer. And same thing happened with my stepdaughter, who's now she's like 46. So, her father's black. Her mother's my wife. And so when my wife got married to this fellow, my mother-in-law took all her stuff that was in the house and put it on the lawn and threw it out. And wouldn't see her until baby was born. And then they wanted to see the baby. And of course, she was adorable. You're adorable. So, grandparents would go, oh, he's so damn cute. His hair's a little too curly, but a little too dark. But and that's, there's another great film you should watch. You ever see the movie Bulworth?
No, actually, maybe a long time ago. I don't remember it though.
Yeah, so if I'll just a short synopsis about this guy who was a liberal senator, and he was in the civil rights when he was young, but he sold out since that time, and he's depressed because he's lost his values, and so he decides, and he can't stand it anymore. He's married to this awful woman, and he hires somebody to kill him, and he's going to get a deal of some life insurance so that his family has a lot of money when he dies, but he can't stand living because he's so he ends up changing his mind because he meets this young black woman, and they fall in love, and he's hiding out in this black neighborhood, and he can't be seen because people are after him, the guy that he hires to kill him. And so he goes out in the neighborhood, he dresses up like some kind of rap star, and he starts talking like that, and he goes on television because he's running for Senate again, and he starts rapping. This guy's like 50 years old, and he's doing this routine to rhythm and shit like that. It's just hilarious. And at one point, the interviewer says, "Well, what what's the solution to all this? And he goes, and he just this long thing and rhythm that he does, and he says it's for everybody to fuck everybody else, and everybody turn brown.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody's a light shade, shade of brown, and then there's no. I mean, we're all kind of brown. I mean, one of the things that I can't, that I never, no one's ever said this, but I think someone should say it, is that I've never met a black person in my life.
Yeah.
There was nobody's black.
Black, yeah.
And there's nobody that's really white. I've seen some pretty pale people, but it's not white.
But I mean, I feel like it can all kind of be chalked up to just tribalism, That's just
Absolutely.
because even if you go to like, I don't know, you went in the middle of Africa, like one culture would have some things about the other culture. They're like, oh, you can't marry one of those, and so
right.
So it happened that in our situation, the Europeans who had such a successful conquest, it's easy to maybe make them the bad guys, but I don't think that like anybody's innocent, It's like
absolutely.
It was everyone would have done it if they could, kind of.
Well, everybody did it on their small level.
Yeah.
Even in these little communities in the Midwestern farm were I mean, my mother-in-law wasn't violent, but she was, she was a form of violence to just say, I can't love you anymore. I can't like you anymore. I'm throwing all your stuff out. It's her daughter, for crying out loud. So if she was the president of some company or some country, she might have done the same thing. I think that's an important thing to realize, that we're all, that's a very human, natural. Then this gets back to the beginning of the conversation. It's like, because it's natural, it doesn't mean it's good. Part of what we're here to do is to conquer these animal things and move beyond them. Absolutely. We're trying to evolve into this recognition that we're all human, and we will. I won't live to see it, but it's like, and the answer is, how are you going to be prejudiced against your own family for long? A little baby, how are you going to reject your kids who are homosexual for long? When I taught my last couple of years of teaching college, it's like, my students would all go, how your generation was like against homosexuality? How can you do that? But when I was growing up, you never even talked about it. And if somebody was gay, it was one of the worst things you could say to anybody. You're a sissy. The guys are a sissy means you're a girl, means you're, transgender stuff. All this stuff is like, people are doing it, and once you're not going to stop it. And this is where a good government is important, because human rights don't happen because people are changed. If you wait for people to change their hearts, nothing will ever happen. There has to be against the law. It has to be supported by the law. So,
well, I think the thing is, when you legislate, you're trying to legislate good behavior. I don't think that goes deep enough into the heart.
Well, it doesn't, but it's what I'm saying is that changing.
Good song,
if you wait for people to change their hearts, people are basically ignorant. All of us are ignorant, and we come out of this.
But do you think the government can?
It has to. Better? Well, that's what the founders were saying. They're saying, yes, of course they were. They were saying, look, where we come from, the people who are rich and powerful are the ones who can do whatever the fuck they want to do, and the rest of us just have to follow along. Well, that isn't all right. Justice has to be equal. So if somebody breaks the law, we have to have laws and standards. And I think this is something you really need to consider. I think that the rule of law is basic to human evolution, and the laws are constantly changing to catch up to human change. And so
they're also constantly changing to like serve anybody's bidding.
Well, have you ever seen the movie Loving, where it's about this white guy and a black woman got married, and I think it was in Arkansas, and they were put in jail for it. They were put in jail for it because it was a crime to marry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they went to finally got to the Supreme Court after 12 years. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that to people. But the states were saying, yeah, of course we can. It's against nature for a black man and a white woman, or vice versa, especially, so.
But they were wrong, and
they were wrong. You're right.
And they worked it out through the Supreme Court, but it maybe I could imagine other ways that could be worked out.
Like what?
Well, like moving to a different state where that wasn't the law, or.
Well, but if it used to be, this is probably the 40s. It wasn't acceptable anywhere. There were individuals who might have accepted it, but my wife had lived in Michigan, and people were against it. Her own family was against it. There are people who are still against it, aren't there?
Yeah, and I guess I just believe that it's a better practice to try and inspire those people to change their minds rather than legislate, because I think that anytime we give the government a new power, it's going to be used against us eventually. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, but like anything else, legislation and government is imperfect. So we're trying to. The question is, should we let anybody do whatever they want to do to someone else? No.
Okay. So someone's got to enforce that.
For sure.
I feel, what if I say, I feel like when my neighbors piss me off, I should be able to go and fucking shoot them.
Well,
or I should be able to knock their windows in. And that's what I do.
Well, I think that
don't fuck with me.
That stuff falls under the Constitution, though.
Right. Well, it's all about the Constitution. And the Constitution has to be.
Not that I'm against laws. I just think that laws shouldn't be the primary way that we try and change society.
The Constitution isn't about changing your heart. It's about laws.
Yeah, I know. But those set of laws, almost like, this is going to make it too holy, but like the 10 Commandments, it's like, first of all, you get to think and believe and practice whatever religion you want, and also you get to defend yourself. So like, you know what I mean? There's these certain set, like the Constitution's only so long, and of course they've made amendments, but all the laws on the books, like all of the laws, it's like uncountable,
Well, but that's how because the Founding Fathers were very smart, and what they did was they made it general, so that it could be interpreted according to the way the society changes. And so that's what the legal system isn't about, saying this is the law and it'll always be the law. That's exactly what it's not. It's standards change. And so, one of the things that people said about a lot of the judges, even like Ruth Bader Ginsburg at one point said that, I think we made a mistake in outlawing, in accepting abortion too soon. And I think she was right at some level.
And why is that?
Because the country wasn't ready for it. So it created a reaction that still exists. So the people have to evolve so there's more of a consensus. If you give people laws that they disagree with in a large amount, it's not going to work. It's going to lessen respect for the law,
especially over 50 different states.
Right. And so, right. Women, talk about equal rights. Women didn't vote until 1920. 4 years before my father was born. So, they weren't ready for it. Susan B. Anthony was arrested and put in jail for voting. And so there were a lot of people who would say, women shouldn't be in the middle of politics. They don't have the kind of mentality. They're too emotional. And so we're not going to, and women, one of the strongest group that were against women voting were women.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And so they had to say, finally in the 1920s, it was very controversial. It came down to the last state, and one voter in Tennessee decided to change his mind, and then it was passed. And that's one of the things.
Male voter.
Well, it had to be a male voter because there were no female voters. And the story is that this guy was from the hills of Tennessee or something, and his mother wrote him a letter and said, "Now be a good boy and vote for women's voting." And he said, "Okay, Mom."
Okay, Mom.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and so that's, and there were a lot of voices against it. And one of the reasons people were against women voting is because they said, when women vote, we're going to have prohibition because women are against drinking. And that's exactly what happened.
They're like, we can't let the women vote. They're going to take the booze away.
Right. But they did, and it was a mistake. So you could go back and say we shouldn't have done it because women are so stupid. They passed this prohibition law, and anyway.
But I think the fact that we made that change, and we also made the change of civil rights and civil war and all that,
right.
I feel like we were talking about in our text thread, is that that shows that things are working. So it's not really maybe a slash against America, so to speak, because like we fixed that before a lot of other places.
Right. No, I think
you're glitching out again.
Not because we're all good. It's because I think America is it's a great thing. It's a great process, and it's not because we're so good and, because everybody's nice and, but because we constantly change and that's why criticism is important.
Yeah.
If we ignore what happened, if we ignore the way that race has influenced, like housing, I mean, there's a book I read, I forget the name of it. Am I cutting out again?
No.
Where this guy says, because there's been this redlining for so many, what redlining is?
Yeah. That's what I read is redlining. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because we've done this for so long, Black families don't have as much wealth. They haven't built it up over time because that's how people grow. And so that's an example of systemic racism. I mean, people go, we're not racist. We're not racist anymore. Well, there's a whole history and there's a whole bunch of laws and practices that have been in place since before, since the 1700s. And so you want to ignore that, you're not going to be able to fix it. Because we have the laws to fix it. We have the system to fix it.
I don't think that anybody that I've ever heard talk about it wants to ignore it. I think there's different thoughts about it, but what would your solution be to that?
For what?
How to catch Black
systemic? Oh, how to catch them up?
Yeah, or reparations.
Well, I don't think reparations is a good idea, particularly. I think it's happening now. I mean, there are lots of. I mean, things have changed so much since I was young. In terms of African Americans, and and it's they're being assimilated. And that's going to happen. I mean, and even if they don't assimilate, they're still going to there are more opportunities. And so I don't think I'm not expert enough to really give that kind of advice, but I want to say that I trust the system.
Well, so let me tie some laws into this.
Yeah.
Not that I'm going to quote any specific laws, but we're talking about whether law is good or used for evil, and I think there's a lot of laws that have been passed that seem to be for good things that have actually helped or hurt the Black community. Like I think that you get more welfare money if you're a single mother, and so it encourages. I've heard this argument. I'm not sure if this is true, but it encourages Black families to not have both parents.
That has happened.
And so, you know what I mean? There's certain things, you know what I mean? It's so complicated,
right. Well, here's the question, and here's part of what human beings do is that there's always somebody trying to take advantage of and trying to figure out how to be cute and clever.
Yeah.
To get around it.
Yeah.
So but that's a minority of people. It's not the majority of people. There are lots of, welfare doesn't give you a lot of money. And so are we going to eliminate help for single mothers? because of what some people do?
It's just I know, but it's
Can
just
we
super complicated.
can we allow those kinds of consequences in
But
order to help a lot of people?
we've also seen the black single motherhood rate skyrocket, and
It's actually gone down, I think.
okay, well maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but
And
and and
that's
and I've heard too, and it is a conservative talking point, but the number one thing that is sending young men to prison is, or like, and not graduating school is having a father in the home.
yeah, and I don't think, I think because you have to be careful when two things happen simultaneously that one causes the other. It's not necessarily true.
Sure.
So, there is, I mean, there's a narrative that basically says, okay, look, how long ago has it been that human beings, that black men have been discriminated against in a serious way? When I went to school and it was a mistake, but I went to school for a year in Waco, Texas, and I was there. I think I mentioned when Martin Luther King was killed, and my roommate's friend was running down the hall going, "Hey, they shot that black bastard." Oh, okay, all right. And then I went to get a haircut in the middle of Waco, and there was this city town hall, and we were talking to the barber. He goes, "I remember the last time they hung a black person in that square over there in 1938." And I went, okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I forget, what was the original question?
Just that.
Oh yeah. So to understand how black men in particular have been discriminated against, and violently so. I mean, the whole thing in Tulsa where the blacks created a neighborhood where people were wealthy. They started a black middle class in Tulsa, and they just burned the whole fucking place down.
Yeah, which is a tremendous act of evil.
Right, and that's just one extreme example of it's like, even like this. There's been a study recently where they said they had somebody send in their application for a job, and one application said, my name is George Lewis, and the other one said, my name is Jamil Lewis, and Jamil didn't get the interview. It was the same guy.
Yeah.
So to say that doesn't exist, there until there's a change in that system, and it's and a system is more than just the way that things work. It's the way that people perceive things too.
I would never argue that it didn't exist, but I would just argue about what type of intervention we should.
Yeah, that's a difficult question, but to do nothing, I don't think is acceptable.
I agree.
To wait till people change their hearts isn't going to happen.
Well, I don't, and just to pick apart that sentence, the word wait, I don't believe we should wait. I believe we should act, but I just don't think the government's good at things. I think they're lazy, or not lazy, but slow and dumb.
Well, yeah, it's very slow. So it has to. If it's not slow, if you do something before it's the right time, it doesn't work. It has to be slow. Government is a catch up.
I hear that.
Government is catching up with where we are.
You know how fast like an idea like in a song can go spread through the whole world, and I'm sound like John Lennon or something, you know what I mean? But
well, that's part of the change that happens.
Just rather than give the government more powers ever, I'm like, what else can we do? Is there anything?
Well, you can't do anything other than that. To say that you can't give. I mean, here's the thing. What is government? Government is the way we organize ourselves.
Well, it's elected officials and all that.
Right, but
maybe this will sound conspiratorial, but I would argue that maybe that apparatus has been captured.
Well, it's always captured. It is captured, but it's also has its, it's more complicated than that. because I think there's enough people who, even in Russia, I mean, it's not a it's, it's not a monolithic point of view. Not all people in Russia are going, Putin is great.
Yeah. Same in
Some
Ukraine.
people are saying that guy's got to go.
Yeah.
But they can't say it. But he will go. You know what I mean? Because people, so people do change. But in the meantime, what do you do? Do you pray about it? Do you change the gun laws? That's what people say. Oh yeah, the next time they slaughter a bunch of children, let's pray for it, and maybe God will intervene, or maybe there's So I am, and again, this is my position. Feel very strongly about it. I'm a strong supporter of what they call the rule of law, and it's not just federal law, but it ultimately is over. You can't get to the Supreme Court just because you feel like it. You have to go through all the local courts, and there has to be some serious reason. So the federal government just doesn't go in. I mean, they make federal laws if you're doing something across the state. Taking a white woman across the state line to have sex with her, and that's how that was an abuse of the law, because it was ruled by how do we get this black dude, because he's too cocky.
And so you're like, that law can go.
Right. Well, I think it's still a law, but it's not like, if so the law, the court has to say, well, this isn't just this guy's girlfriend like it was with Jack Johnson. This guy is taking young women. This is what's happening now. There is, sex trafficking is a serious thing. So it's like these guys are taking these runaway girls, turning them into prostitutes, and then sending them across the state. The federal government says, we have laws against that.
Yeah.
And we're gonna take you down.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? If he goes across the state gonna do something? Is some guy gonna come up and say, well, you need a change of heart. Let me pray for you.
I hear you.
Okay.
Once you cross state lines, it becomes federal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it governs a number of things like prices and certain kinds of behavior that when we're talking about legal, we're talking about work, for instance. Like some states have what they call a right to work law, which means, what that is?
Mm-mm.
So it means that in order to get a job, you don't have to join the union. Some places, it's okay. Unions, this is one of the negative things about, or the difficult things about unions, is that unions will say, well, if we don't have everybody join the union, how are we going to bring everybody together and do a boycott? And so some states like Arizona and where I come from say, we're not going to accept, that's not okay. You should be able to get this job and not belong to the union. So, but some states say no. So the federal government hasn't intervened in that in any way, and that's okay. I have, and I can see both sides. It's like you're being forced to pay dues, and especially since sometimes unions are totally ineffective. They don't do shit.
Yeah.
But sometimes they do. Again, without unions, you wouldn't have. They'd work your ass off, and inferior situation, they treat you like shit, and you wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Anyway, so that's an important question, Luis. And this is not something, what laws are acceptable. I would have to say that the federal government at some level needs to exist for some sort of unity and some sort of justice that's spread. So, and again, like any other thing, we're always in this pendulum. Too much government control. Oh, we don't want that. Let's do less government control. Oh, people are getting away with all kinds of shit. Let's do. So there's, that's the way it works. And the courts move. It's a dynamic situation. It isn't like this is the law and you don't like it, tough shit. Well, it'll change probably if it's unjust.
Do you have an example of the other swing though, where they like relaxed laws and then people got away with shit? I don't know any examples.
Yeah, well, there was, and I don't know the dates very much. So one of the things that uh, involved the government in controlling uh, corporations was uh, people like, let me see if I can get an example. I forget the guy who started the railroad. So there was a bunch of, when corporations grew, like the Rockefeller gas thing, you know, um, I can't think of names anyway. Steel industry who did that. Anyway, so the again, they basically said, you can do what you want to do. It's laissez-faire capitalism. And so go to town, I mean, steel industry, it's great. We're becoming, it's wealthy, we're building railroads. It's great. Oil company, we need oil, blah, blah, blah. And so the people at the top were Carnegie, what's his name? Carnegie and Andrew Carnegie, who, and all these people had basically unlimited power. So they could, they would work people without a break. They would, kind of things that Amazon is doing, kind of does now a little bit.
Yeah.
That's another example of where it's gone. So, it's like you can be in unsafe conditions. You're in the coal mine. We don't give a shit if you can breathe or not. It's not going to be safe, and that's okay because we have to make this money. And so they're not concerned about that. So, there's a combination, I'm oversimplifying it, but there's a combination of, they call it antitrust law. So part of this problem is that they destroy the competition. So they use ways that they use their money and power to undermine any kind of competition. So that once power puts themselves in a position, like Facebook, there's some question about that. It's like everybody uses Facebook. There's no competition. And they can do whatever they want to do, and so the government says, hey, and so Mark Zuckerberg goes, okay, we'll try to do this. But back in this age of what they call the early barons of, they were extreme in their, so, and if someone struck, they would have, I think it was in the steel mill in Pittsburgh or somewhere, it's Carnegie's thing. And I might be wrong about this facts, but, so unions started coming up. This was after the Russian Revolution, and people were going, these guys are communists, and a lot of them were. There wasn't a stigma against being a communist. It says workers of the world unite. They're treating us like shit. Let's unite. So they walk off the thing, and they start protesting. And so one of these guys said, okay, I'm going to have so he started a militia that would shoot these people.
Yeah.
And beat the shit out of them. I had a friend of mine's father who was a union leader in 30s or something like that, and he got the shit beat out of him, thrown in jail because he was demonstrating, and the government said, okay, you've gone too far.
Well, let me just interject for a second.
Yeah.
I know that I think under every system there's abuses of power. So
absolutely,
when you're trying to decide like free market capitalism or like socialism, communism, I have just seen like there's been so much bloodshed under communist revolution, and like the thing with the kulaks, and so this would be a Jordan Peterson point is so Marx goes to the working class and says, hey, these rich farmers have all the money, let's go get it. And then after they go take all these farmers out, which they killed them and took all their stuff, then 500,000 Ukrainians starved the next year because those farmers didn't make the food. Right. And so, you know what I mean? It's like unintended consequences.
Well, here's the thing about, let me talk about that a little bit, because that's something that I made note of. First of all, Lenin was like the first experiment in communism, and it didn't go very well. But it's changed since then. And so what it's gotten into, so what you hear is, okay, Cuba, Venezuela, other places like that. What happened was that basically Cubans in the Venezuela, Chavez and Castro basically said, so both Venezuela and Cuba were good examples of they were like our colonies. We ruled, we owned their economy, we owned their resources, and we set up things and we took their oil and stuff like that, yeah. And Shell company, and so Chavez, let me focus on that. Chavez said, we're having a revolution and we own our oil, own our own oil, and we're throwing out these companies. And they went, you're a communist. And so Chavez did that, and he raised millions of people out of poverty by doing that.
Didn't a lot of people die too?
And here's what, yeah, well, yeah, people died because, and this is the downside. You do some force. I don't know exactly. I mean, people are dying now for different reasons. Let me finish this.
Sorry.
So basically, our reaction to Cuba was the first. So let me say, basically what we did was we said, if you're going to do that, we have so much power that we're going to deny you use of your own money. So you're going to make money, but you can't use it. You have stuff to trade, but we won't let you. And so, and then we look at them like in Venezuela. Now we're going, it isn't working. Their system isn't working. People are dying. They're starving because they can't use their own money because we won't let them.
I hear you. It's a biased perspective.
Well, it's the truth. It's that's what we do to Iran. It's what we've done to Afghanistan. And as soon as we do that, people start dying. We don't like the Taliban, so they can't have any money. The Taliban goes, well, how are we going to pay people? How are we going to get the society going? That's your problem. We don't, and then they go, Taliban, they just don't know how to run the place because they're, but no matter, they're terrorists, they're communists. Totally. If we had, so, but basically it's a Cuba was like this little gold mine. People would go down, Cuba was run by the mafia in a lot of ways before, it was like, we have Las Vegas now. Havana was Las Vegas. And so, the Italians would go down there and they'd organize it. And they'd have, prostitutes, they have all this stuff going on. And, Castro said, this is ridiculous. And we're not, we want to take over our own country and because the guy who was in, the guy who's, I forget his name, whoever was the prime minister then, was in, basically being paid off by the mafia. And so when Castro took over, you okay?
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking for this book.
Okay. When Castro took over, and he came to the United States, they gave him a ticker tape parade down Madison Avenue, wherever they do it. So he was like a hero to the United States, even though he was a communist, because we didn't. And then we went. Then he goes, "Oh well, we can't let you take stuff from us." And we have. And then basically he, one of the problems with that kind of communism is that, and we don't know to what extent who's being punished. They go, what you can make, the money you can make is limited. And that can be a problem. But at the same time, there's free healthcare. If you're a musician in Cuba, you can go to school and be trained in the best music skills, and you'll have gigs when you get out all the time because they have concerts, and you don't have to pay anything. They test people. If you're a good dancer, they'll train you as a ballerina. If you're a good doctor, they have some of the best doctors in the world. Hold on a second. Anyway, I just got a text. So that's the upside, the downside, and what happens in a place like, for instance, in getting back to Russia and China, it's like there really are no purely communist countries anymore. Some of the richest entrepreneurs in the world are Russians and Chinese. So they have this mixed. But one of the things that China does, and for instance, and you'll see this in a cruder way in Cuba and in Venezuela, is that they put limits on your wealth. They say, and you get in China, if you make billions of dollars and you're not paying into it, they stop. They go, you're not sharing the wealth. We're going to have to take some. And people go, wait a minute, but they've raised more people out of poverty than we ever have. So it's a trade-off at some point. So the world is looking at us and going, wait a minute. The world is looking at us and looking at stuff and going, which one of these systems works? We want a system where we can't express our opinion, but we get everything we need. And the wealth is shared, or at least to the point. Or do we want a system where nobody can do anything in Congress and they just argue about stupid shit?
Well, that's oversimplification.
Of course it is. Right, but I
would say, or do we want a system where we allow everything to freely take place, and sometimes it fucks up, but
right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, I'm not advocating. I said that. Oh, Jesus. I keep getting these. My grandson's texting me mercilessly. Anyway, yeah, I said that on purpose to provoke. But I was being someone in the world, a third party in the world, looking and going, look at all these people that are being raised out of poverty. They have everything they need, and look at these people in the United States. They go around shooting each other. And they won't pass gun laws, and they won't take care of their people. Not everybody has health care. It's like, do I want that? And the Congress is like, they can't pass anything. They argue about, this is black Supreme Court justice, and they go, well, she's a pedophile. Oh.
Yeah, no, I get you.
That's not necessarily me. That's people are watching us, and can we swing the pendulum back to where there's some sort of government that functions in a way where the inequality, and I think there's one of this. I'll stop talking after this. This for at least for a minute. Yeah. So, in terms of like one way of looking at inequality is the difference in pay between the CEOs and the average worker, right?
Yeah.
So 1965, it was 21-1. So I make $1. My boss makes 21 more. In 1989, it was 61-1. In 2019, it was 307-1. And last year it was 351-1. So, there's nothing that dictates that. It's whoever has the power decides how much. So people Jeff Bezos makes how many billions of dollars? The people that work for him, work their asses off, and how much do they make? Do they have? And they're trying to remedy that, but
maybe we should just not work for people like that.
Yeah, well, some people, take the job that they need, or they.
There's not a lot.
That's all they can do.
I know it's messed.
There might be. I don't know. It's like.
Rather than give the government even more power, because it's like if we were to implement socialism or communism here, or some form of it, even a new form, I feel like, I guess I'm not willing to risk it going poorly.
Well, here's the thing, and I think that, again, there is no country, with the possible exception of Cuba. I don't know about Cuba. There's no major country in this world that is communist. Purely, there's no major country in this world that is free enterprise. Totally. It's a mixture. So the question is, where's the balance? And the balance changes all the time. That's my point. So it's like, what do we want? What do we need now? Where does the balance need to go? Does the balance need to go in terms of more freedom for billionaires and big renters? Do people need, a little distribution of the wealth that goes down a little bit so that everybody, if they get sick, don't have to go bankrupt?
Absolutely.
Be
nice.
A person can work a job and be able to pay their own rent. I know people
handle that stuff at a community or state level without,
it's possible. There are such things. You can do that. But what if they don't?
Yeah, for sure.
And they're not really handling it now necessarily. But do we need to? And what would that be? I don't know. I don't have the answers. I'm not, like you said, it's so complicated and there's so many unintended consequences because, like with communism, Lenin said, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, right. Didn't work. Not in the way that, it was just pretty awful.
I read Marx and I was a communist, anarcho-communist, maybe in times in my early 20s,
Sure.
And Peterson helped me dissolve that in a way, kind of.
You're freezing up. You're freezing up.
I'll start back.
Go ahead.
I used to be a communist socialist, essentially. Yeah. I was like quite a revolutionary. I was like down. I was like, let's do this,
Yeah.
But like Che Guevara shirt,
Sure.
But I think that sometimes it's like this youthful perspective that doesn't understand like how messed up people are, Yeah. And you think, we just take the chains off and it'll all work out. It's like,
right.
So I'm just like, to realize that I was at a point in my life willing to like fight for this thing that I didn't even actually understand what it was going to do to the society.
Right.
I was just kind of passionate about it. I was like, sure. Workers' rights and like, fuck the system. And, but at a certain point, it's like,
that's typical.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately. It's like, who decides, so you're like, okay, we're going to take this money from these rich people. This guy's company is virtuous because we like what he's doing. This guy's company, he's just getting rich off the backs of poor people, which is a conversation I just had recently. And I'm like, well, who makes that decision at a certain point? It's like, that's what scares me the most is then the government comes through and they're like, your business is worth it. Your business is not. We're going to take your money, not take your money.
Well,
and the government sucks at that.
Yeah. Well, it's not, I think the way you're characterizing the whole idea of taking money, it's not like, well, yours is good and yours isn't. It's not a question of good. It's a question of the amount.
Quantity.
It's a question of the system. It's not like we like you for no reason.
Well, I've just heard that argument though. People are like, well, if you're a bullshit rich man, then we're taking your money. But if you're doing something good, I'm like, well, who makes that decision? And that's where it gets scary.
Yeah. Well, that's why there has to be a law. The law is very specific.
Okay.
It should be very specific. So the law says, okay, for instance, if your CEO makes 1,000 times more than the average worker, something's wrong, and you're going to we'll give you so many years to change that because basically you're fucking with your workers. Now, the unions at a local level can deal with that too. That's an example of like communists said, workers of the world unite. You didn't say the government's going to come in and change you. It said the workers of the world have power. Communism isn't about the government. In Marx says, the central government is a phase that has to be phased out.
Well, somebody has to do the enforcement.
Right. Exactly. Until it becomes habit. So, that's the thing. Human beings don't act out of altruism. And we don't just do that all the time. So to be, there's a certain, when people live together, there has to be standards. There has to be ways, with my granddaughter, you can't just talk to anybody any way you want to do. You can't just have anything you want anytime you want it. That's an important lesson. You have to learn to respect people, if you want to live together in some good way. And so those things are enforced at a family level.
Absolutely.
But your family, they have to be, and I was watching this documentary about Gates. What's his name? Bill Gates. That he, at some point, he was 13 and he turned to his mother and said, "What gives you the right to tell me what I can do and what I can't? You have no right to do that, because I'm an individual. And so I'm going to do what I fucking want to do. You want me to go to dinner when I don't want to? I'm not going." And so he said, and he was kind of a wild card, but eventually he came around, but he's still, he was an extraordinary guy. But the point is that to have any kind of social, it's inevitable. We're social beings, and there has to be limits, and there will be limits. And somebody's an authority. Now, who those authorities are used to be, the wiser, older people, and I think that's a good thing. That's my part of my function in this family, is to give a perspective. And I say, well, if you think about it this way, I don't say, you do this or you're going to get this. And, I go, I assume that my family are intelligent, and we sit and talk about shit. And we have values, and I brought my kids up that way. We talk about stuff. People will look at me and say, "Oh yeah, you're not religious and you're on the left, so you must be an atheist. You don't care about values." Like, fuck you. You don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, I don't, it's like, that's the thing. Characterizing people on the left is just stupid. It's ignorance. Anyway, but so your question is an important question, and it is the, in some ways, the most important question in our society, is like, who decides? How do we decide? And what are the limits of that decision? We have to have some kind of precedence, and hopefully, the founding fathers were trying to set up this the system to where we can make these kinds of judgments along the way, because it's always changing. That's the one thing. So, and so conservatives, by definition, tend to say, we'll go to the past. What did they do in the past? Let's do that. But, there is no past in the past is also an interpretation of what was going on. Always an interpretation. Okay. Hey, well, thanks. This is fun. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for doing this with me.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure.
Who else I've been talking with a lot is Scott Thayer.
Scott is the guy. Is he the guy that used to have his own record store?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like Scott.
Well, it was really funny too. It'd be funny if he watches this, because I haven't told him this, but when Trump was in office and stuff was really hot, he was one of the first people that I heard. He was like, "I've had enough." He's like, "If you like Trump, don't even talk to me," which I don't like Trump, but I'm the type of person who wants to talk about everything,
Yeah.
but having somebody just draw the hard line, and I was like, oh shit, I can't even talk to Scott, but then I think he probably got the vibe that I was not talking to him about politics. Yeah. And then he just dug in on it. He's like, "Okay, so what do you think?" And then we just started having these great conversations. We'll get together and play chess and hang out.
Cool. He's cool.
It's just important to have these conversations.
Absolutely. Well, it's my favorite thing to do. It's funny. Some weeks I spend like, 6 hours talking to 3 different people on remotely, mostly. I don't talk to people in person. I don't know that many people here. But wasn't it in his record store that you met Matt?
Actually, it was in his record store that I got the job, so to speak.
Right.
We were talking about this Gabor Szabo record, and
right, Gabor Szabo.
Yeah, and he was just like, do you ever think about being on the radio? And he's like, give me Matt's number, and
fabulous. That's great how that happened.
Yeah, Scott and we hang out a lot. We're good buds now.
Cool, good.
So
yeah, what do you got?
So yeah, by chance, do you remember the last thing you were saying right before we took a break?
Do you remember what we were talking about at all?
I just lost it. I have two things written down here, but there was something I was just gonna throw in, but it's okay. Let it go. Unless you remember.
Free. You just froze a little bit.
You back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll just go on to this next point here.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about Bill Gates or rich guys or tax the rich idea. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on. So say you put a cap on somebody's wealth, but what if it's somebody who's like, Elon Musk, and he's creating the new technology for like saving the planet or whatever, and it's just like we're so focused on capping people's wealth that he never gets to save the planet,
Well,
not that he's going to save the planet, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, how long will it take someone to spend $20 billion?
Well, I mean, he's making profits to do it pretty quick.
Well, here's what happens to. I mean, this is my understanding of him. So the way that he supports his lifestyle is that he borrows money against his holdings at a very low rate.
Okay.
And doesn't pay taxes on that. He doesn't have to pay taxes on it. So he ends up being able to live lavishly without having to pay a commensurate amount of tax. So that becomes a problem. And so he went ahead and sold a couple $1 billion worth of the stuff, and so he could pay some taxes, which was, he said, okay, I'll do that. So, is that really, do you understand how much $1 billion is?
Yeah.
Okay. That, if you have only $1 billion, is that going to impede you from doing stuff? I mean, he doesn't, I mean, I don't know how much he contributes.
I mean,
financially to saving the planet. I mean, is going out into space,
he's just one example of an individual genius, like the original Nikola Tesla,
Yeah. Nikola Tesla probably didn't make much money.
Well, he got smashed by big corporations, and they made him feel like he was crazy, and he died alone.
Sure.
But my question is just back to who decides, who makes that decision.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are two questions, and I think let me just say one more thing about that first question, and that is, that creativity in itself shouldn't depend on how much money you have, especially when it's more than you ever would need. So, okay, so that's so who decides? Well, again, it's a complicated process how this happens, and usually there's some abuse of it that happens over a long period of time, and then there's different ways of dealing with it. So if there's a union, the union might try to do that. The state might try to do like they do a right to, so they abuse the whole idea of everybody has to pay into the labor. Of course, that's different, but so they're usually, again, the law is catching up to what's happening already, and there's not a law that's being passed or initiated until someone goes, this is fucked up, let's do something about it. And so and somebody introduces that in the state legislature, blah blah blah, and then it happens somewhere else, and then it happens somewhere else. Civil rights, so civil rights goes, the people are going, well, these people are, you can kill these people and they're never convicted, or they can't ride a bus without getting beat up. They have to sit in the back of the bus, or all these kinds of things. And so the state goes, that's the way we do it here, and other places go, wait a minute, that's just not cool. So then somebody draws attention to it, and then Washington goes, okay, I'm gonna, I feel strongly about this, I'm going to initiate this law, I'm going to write this law, and then I'm going to have to get people to go along with it. So that's what Lyndon Johnson did in 1964. He said, Kennedy started to do this, but he was killed, and then Johnson goes, okay, the South is ruled by my party, the Democrats, and they're against civil rights. But I'm a really good politician, so I'm going to twist some arms. I'm going to make them some promises, and they're going to vote it in. But what's going to happen is that eventually when I do this, the South is going to turn Republican, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that's what happened. So I think, in a lot of ways, Lyndon Johnson was a great president for that, for stuff like that. And it was, the greatest kind of social planning since Roosevelt. And so he said, and so it's rare when the government does something like this. It says, we're going to enforce civil rights everywhere. We're tired of the bullshit. And it isn't okay. It goes against our freedom of, the pursuit of happiness. It goes against, and we're just going to fucking do it now. And this has been going on for many years. They didn't just say, okay, we want to do this to you guys because we're the federal government. It takes a long, I've known some of my former students have been interns, and one of them works for Kristen Sinema. She's been there working for them. And they tell me that Washington is one of the most conservative places they've ever seen because it's made up of mostly people from rural areas, people in Congress. I mean, it's not this wild place that go, yeah, we want to control the world. And anyway, so the point is that, it's not so easy. And it usually happens when there's a serious abuse. And, even when they amended the Constitution for women's suffrage, it took years to do that. And every state had to ratify, or the majority of states had to ratify it. So it's not something that happens lightly.
But so we've got civil rights and like women's rights on one side, but then, we're talking about Elon Musk and money. I feel like when people want to tax the rich, I feel like maybe they're biased because of course you want the money,
Well, yeah. I mean, here, let's put it in terms of Elon Musk. So it's like Elon Musk has $20 billion and you work a full-time job and you make $25,000. So what are we going to do with that?
I'm not as smart as Elon Musk.
So if you're stupid, you don't deserve to have all you need. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's hard. That's hard.
Well, here's the thing. We can do this. We could do this now if we had a certain amount of tax, not just the rich, but corporations or whatever, and then also, and we had different priorities in terms of, we spent $3 trillion fighting in Afghanistan. You know what we could have done with that money?
Sure.
So it's not a question of just, this idea of tax the rich. That's oversimplified. There has to be a restructuring of income tax for one, and then also, reprioritizing where the priorities. I mean, is talk about Homeland Security. If you can't earn a living and you don't have money for a doctor, what kind of security is that?
For sure.
Let's spend money chasing after terrorists around the world, but forget about the people who live here. To me, it's a no-brainer. So how you do it is really not something I can say, but there has to be reached. And I don't feel sorry for taxing. Maybe trying to get Elon Musk to do a little bit more. If somebody who, the fact that, it just shows you how things have changed because of the laws. That my grandfather could live a very comfortable life working a shit job. And there are people who people who are teachers who have to go on welfare to make ends meet. And so there needs to be some sort of redistribution of wealth. And the only way to do that is through the law. So do you feel sorry for Elon Musk that we could take some, if we took $30 billion away? No, it's not, it's not a simple thing. And I would agree, but it's not even a question, like even in terms of the amount of money people make for something, it's like, okay. And this is where unions come in. It's like, I work for you, you make 400 times more than I do. I can't survive. And you have 4 homes all over the world. Something wrong with that. And so the government's either, if unions can't do it, because unions have been screwed over. I mean, the laws have made it such where unions, partly because of laws, have been weakened, so that and unions have been crappy. But but unions used to be able to say, okay, we're not going to do that. You're going to have to change we're going to have to be able to live comfortably on our work. There's a problem with, it's not like there are no laws and then suddenly there are laws. The laws are different and they favor certain people in the same way that, you could be a white person and get arrested for cocaine, but if you're I don't know, it's like there are different penalties for different kinds of things. Anyway,
we'll go way harder for crack. Yeah, that whole thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You remember that.
So this is going to sound extreme, but
good.
Yeah, feel me on this, because I feel like it's a possibility. Would you be willing? It's hard to. The way I'm asking this sounds like I'm putting it on you, but I'm not. But would you be willing to fight another civil war to make these changes happen?
Well, that's such a hypothetical question that I don't think it. First of all, these changes wouldn't be changed through war.
But I mean, what if like there was like a hard line and people were like, free market capitalism, not doing that, and we'll fight you for it.
I'm trying to imagine what that would look like. So are you saying that someone is going to take away some of my freedoms and would I fight for them?
No, I'm saying, okay, so the country splits into two factions, those who want socialist things and those who want full free markets. And we're going to have to kind of, maybe at a certain point, if we couldn't agree and legislate it, it ended up actually being a fight. Okay. Is it worth the fight?
Well, but I would fight for both.
Okay. Yeah. So I was like, it's kind of a crazy question.
Well, it's not. It's an interesting question, but I think, it gets back to my original point. My goal isn't to be, would not be to be, one way or the other. And I don't think there's no government around that does that. No one it's a question of degree. So, it depends. I mean, I think I was treated very unfairly when I was trying to get a business together, and I was furious. And I wrote my senator, and the senator wrote me a form letter back saying, "I'm glad you support and we'll continue to fight for you in Congress." And I'm going, okay, so I have no power at some level. So, I think we're too vast of a country to ever get to a point where it's like, I'm going to fight you for this. I mean, people will come in.
Fighting in the streets right now.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like the people in Portland, fighting and, I'm going to throw a paintball at you because it's like, oh man.
Those people got shot.
I know a lot of stupid people get shot.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of other, well, that's another, anyway. So, I can't imagine a situation where I would be, the only situation where I would want to fight somebody is that someone was trying to do something to my family that was, or to me, and I don't, it's our society is just too complicated and sophisticated. And that's why at some level, it's real easy to think of it in terms of some sort of conspiracy, because it reminds me of all these movies like The Matrix or something. What goes on, we don't really. Where's the enemy? We don't know. It's like, is there an enemy? Well, my belief is it's a system problem. It's a systemic problem, and the system is it's like in psychology, our unconscious works through habits. And so, our whole culture is in this habit, and we move, our emotions move into the habits in some way. And so, that's why laws have to be in place. We can't change people's opinions, because opinions are, habits. They're not thoughtful anything. Most people don't really think through any of this stuff, and it would be impossible to. That's why, in some level, government's important. We need to have, for better or for worse, we need to have professional people do this,
For
not
sure.
people like Trump. Trump's a professional, scam artist.
Well, and that's a good point, though, is, going back to my who decides, is I feel like the government's been captured in this, and like even with the representation, like you said, your senator didn't really represent you, and just the thing.
Right.
So, I'm just.
Right. And I think there are problems with professional politicians, but somebody, I mean, people can trash Joe Biden, but Biden has some understanding of what government, how to work government, instead of just like, I mean, Trump was just so rude and so offensive.
For
He's
sure.
just not a very nice person.
For sure.
And the fact that Christians love him is only says to me that Christians are just not Christian.
For sure.
I don't really understand it. But I think that as I get older, and maybe this is obvious to you too, but I mean, it's like human beings are so complicated, and so there's so much goodness and so much darkness. I mean, I basically, when I walk around my neighborhood and stuff, everybody's lovely. I mean, I get in great conversations, and it's a mixed neighborhood. It's mostly Chinese and Asian, and lots of black people come up, and we start conversations all the time. I mean, it's just like, and lots of goodwill, lots of good feeling. Of course, I live in San Francisco. I don't know if that makes any difference, but not really, probably. I mean, most people, that's why at some level, the average person shouldn't need to be involved in politics, because most people don't know shit about it, and they make decisions off of these irrational, and that was, I don't know if you've heard this before, but have you ever read Plato's Republic? Plato.
No, I haven't.
Anyway, so Plato is one part of it. So the Republic basically means, republic means it's about people together. That's all it is. It's about people together. How do you deal with that? And he goes, I'm ranking, there's different levels of quality of government. And the best is, probably, rich, smart people in charge. But the worst is democracy.
No, I hear that.
Or the next to the worst is democracy. The worst is tyranny.
They don't even know how to vote, and they can be manipulated.
Right. And
they're the same people who would tell you, I don't want to talk politics.
Right.
So you're like, why do you have an opinion?
Right. Well, but what Plato was saying is democracy will turn into tyranny, because most people don't have, they're easily influenced by emotion and irrelevant kinds of things, and people who want power will do that. And so Trump's a great example of that. It's like 70% of all Republicans really believe that Biden didn't win the election, even though he, it's like, really? It's like, I never heard such a thing before. It's like there's no real evidence that it happened, and in order to, it's literally impossible for it to happen. So anyway, democracy is someone corrected me and said, it's really a republic rather than just democracy, and so it has to do with the system of representation that is in place. I mean, I don't know that much about it, so I don't. Anyway, what was your original? Oh yeah, about who decides? Is that where we're at with that?
Well, I think we kind of, so you have something else to say about it. I think we kind of got it. It's like,
yeah,
it's complicated. We're going to find out in the next 20 years.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, and this is a footnote I want to say a few things about Jordan Peterson, is that, the thing about Jordan Peterson is that what he says is, on the surface isn't something that you would necessarily disagree with, except that he doesn't take into account, that human beings have dark sides and are really mysterious and do stupid shit.
I think he does. He does.
He basically says, you are wasting time. And so don't waste time, because you're wasting $50,000 worth of time.
Yeah.
And what I say is, sometimes the best times of my life is when I was wasting time or I make mistakes or he
For
wasn't
sure.
doing. It's like he doesn't, he has these oversimplified things like, if you do this and you do that and you always do this and you do this and then you'll be better. And if you don't do this, you're wasting your time. And it's like anything, I mean, I made stupid choices. I made, I wasted time. I was in, I mean, and I became who I am, and it's a good thing. So I don't, it's like human life is a mystery. It's not something. He reduces it to the most cliched stiff that I've ever heard.
Well,
Okay.
I would just interject there and just say that those motivational videos that people make out of Jordan Peterson clips, that's like people are using those like Tony Robbins kind of self-help stuff.
Yeah.
But like I've literally listened to every single Jordan Peterson lecture, and it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah. I wouldn't be. I would hope so. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to say that and connecting it to this whole idea, which I think is an important theme.
I
That
think because of the darkness of humanity, um, that's why we need individual freedom because we can't really trust humanity.
see. Well, that's exactly why. I mean, I think I would say the opposite.
Okay.
Individual freedom is questionable, and freedom, uh, leads to abuse in a sense. That's why we live in a community, because community helps us. If it wasn't for my wife, I'd be a homeless idiot somewhere blabbering about something, preaching on the corner or something. My individuality and my freedom was, an illusion in the
So that
sense that,
happened in your family, not at the government level.
oh, it happened at every level that I went to in my work,
Okay.
and got, well, I don't have interactions with my federal government, although, I did at some point, as far as taxes and stuff. But, what I think what I'm saying is that, is that we're a product of our experiences and our interactions, and our freedom doesn't come out of our inner self. There is no inner self by itself. There is there is a there is an experience. I mean,
Connection.
from a Buddhist point of view, there is no self. We construct ourselves. It's a combination of our natural abilities, our natural tendencies, our culture, and it becomes, and we tell a story about it, and and it's a bunch of habits and stuff. And so, for some people, individual freedom means murdering. It means
Yeah.
abusing.
And
It
there's
means,
got to be some certain laws on that, of course.
right. And so, so I think, again, like government, it's a balance. It's always a balancing between, I mean, I've spent a lot of time alone, and I'm a lot of, I'm very, I'm very committed to being the best individual I can be, and I think that's my responsibility totally, no one else's responsibility. And I need the freedom to do that. And so I've made choices in my life where I have had that. I haven't really worked a real job most of my life, where I've, and that's part of what I had to do in order to gain that. And I mean, I've had some jobs, but they didn't, I just needed that kind of, me personally, because I had that commitment to being a person of integrity that followed my own thing. But I've made some stupid choices. And it's all that, and that's the road to it. It's not a blueprint that I had before. It's not a list of rules and laws and shit like that. It's like things that surprise me. Sometimes I go back to the most basic rules, of respect, and serving others. These are basic things for me. I wouldn't want to enforce them on anyone else, though, right?
Yeah. And I think you definitely sit in that nice balance where, you definitely are arguing for totalitarian
Oh
communism.
God, no.
But like, I don't know, for me, it's like, just to summarize, it's like, I would rather have the whole world be essentially totally free and me be
Yeah,
able to make all the decisions I need to make. Cause there's been so many times in my life where my community was so far off base
yeah.
that I
No,
was
that's
like, and I don't know, like with the legalization of marijuana or something, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so I dove into that place I wasn't supposed to go on my own, and then 5 years later, everyone catches up. 10 years later, everyone catches up, you know.
No,
And
yeah.
so I'm just
No,
like, I just
no,
want
I,
to be
I
careful.
totally agree with you. I mean, the primary thing is individuality. It's primary. You know, it's the only thing we have responsibility for and can do anything about. And have you ever read Nietzsche before?
No, I haven't.
Friedrich Nietzsche? That's his thing. I mean, he's like a prophet of that, you know, and he's also a prophet of, you know, this evolution of human beings into something that creates our own values. We create our own values. We're not here but, you know, and so it's,
When
you know, it's
someone's
a
value
process.
is I get to kill people, then you're like,
Right.
okay, hold on,
Well,
we got to figure
right.
something out here.
Yeah. I mean, he gets into it's complicated, but basically you know, it's like you have to, you know, it's like the Buddha said, you know, it's like, so, you know, Buddha was dying and, you know, his student said, you know, give us something to go by. He goes, there's a light within you. Use that. And I think that's true, you know. And so personally, you know, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, if, you know, my ultimate concern is that and how I relate that in my interactions and my integrity, my love for people. And that's, you know, as far as like political stuff, I have very little control. So I don't, you know, I really, I mean, I wouldn't want a totalitarian place, but at some level, you know, I mean, what the government does isn't my primary concern. You know, I think and I don't know enough about it to know what works. And I don't think anybody else does either. We're trying to work it out. And I think I tend to be kind of an optimist in terms of like the future. I think we're moving in a direction. And this is one of the things I agree with that guy that Jordan Peterson was talking to. It's like, you know, we're improving immeasurably, and we're going to continue, and it's going to spread more and more around. You know, and I think it's really not in our hands. You know, we can talk about it, but I mean, I'm not going to be in a position to influence any of that, even with my vote. I mean, you know, I have a friend who's taught political science for 40 years at Columbia University, and he hasn't voted since the 1970s. He sees it as completely irrelevant because whatever he votes for, it doesn't really matter what happens. So what's the difference? This is a question I don't have an answer for. What's the difference between that and a totalitarian state? If you don't have any influence on the government anyway, either way, what the hell's the difference?
Well, in
If
that case, let's not give them any more power.
I mean, I would like to see the government focus on what I call the distribution of resources, so that everybody. I mean, we have such a rich and powerful country that we can provide now. We can provide everything that everyone needs. You know, we're not talking about, you know, riches. We're talking about food, talking about shelter, talking about healthcare. We're talking about community. Those kinds of things are available, but you know, the resources are stuck in little places that people go, oh, I'm gonna keep it. You know, I mean, also known as greed. You know, and that's another human reality. I mean, that's just not, you know. So I mean, that's what I would like to see. And then, you know, I'm a social libertarian in the sense I want to. Doesn't matter who I want to fuck. Doesn't matter who I want to do with how I want to live my life. What I want to, you know, it's like none of your fucking business.
Absolutely.
But you know, if you're going to do anything, we have a vast wealth, and it should be shared, and that's the best way to go. I mean, people, you know, don't want to. Some people don't want that because they hope they could become rich someday. But I don't really care. I've never been motivated by money in a sense of that. Which I mean, I'm not bragging. That's just the way I am. You know, I'm lucky enough to live in you know, I grew up in a family where my father, you know, provided everything, and I never had to worry about it. So I don't worry about it now either. I have a lot less money than my father ever had. It didn't really matter because I have everything that I need.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, man, let's wrap it up.
Okay. Hey, thanks. Hope I didn't talk too
No,
much.
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it's great to see you, and you have a real light in you that I've really dug it. You know, really love your vibe and your openness and your love. I can feel it. So thanks again. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Well, let's do this again sometime.
San Francisco. Say something.
Wait, well, you glitched out. What was that?
Oh, so yeah, if you're ever in San Francisco, come by.
I will.
Yeah.
Certainly
Okay.
will.
All right. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.